This is The Skinny with Rico Elmore and Adam Ritz. Brought to you by Fatheads, the undisputed leader in oversized eyewear.
And welcome to The Skinny with your host, Rico Elmore. I'm your co-host, Adam Ritz. We are coming to you live from the Fathead Suite on the Turn 2 of the Indianapolis Motor Speedway with special guest and Indy 500 legend, Bobby Unser. Hi, Bobby.
Nice to be here. Thank you.
50 years past winning here. I watched a little bit of the thing that you did with Dave first. Very cool. Very cool. Can you relive a little bit of that and what was going on that day when you ran?
Well, 50 years. Geez. Number one, Doug, the big boss here, gives me a call. Now, he never calls me. I call him. When I'm hustling something, you know what it's like, Rico.
Yes, sir.
I call Doug, and he'll always figure out a way to get back to me or answer the phone, whatever. So he calls me one morning, and I thought, that's a little strange. You know, it means he wants something. Normally like me.
Right.
And so he says, I want you to do the parade. I says, man, Doug, I don't do those parades. I did them for years, you know. That's enough, you know. I mean, I don't particularly like the parades, I guess. So he says, Bobby, he says, do you realize you've been here, this is your 50th year since you won your first race here? Well, there I am really quick, taking my pen out. I'm on my desk. I'm adding and subtracting because I can't do it in my head like you can. Rico can do that. Some people can. I can't. So I'm there. I said, man, it's really been 50 years. How could it be 50 years? And so I said, Doug, number one, if you really want it done, I'll always do it for you. That's good. I mean, that's just standard. Number two, 50 years? I says, I didn't think I'd been there that long. I mean, 50 years is a long time.
It's a long time.
So, and I didn't believe it until I figured it out on my paper there, you know. So I says, yeah. I was coming back anyway, but I wasn't going to do the parade anyway. And I'm telling you, we got more happy people in the parade. I mean, talk about a turn on. My wife is there, and I brought my two daughters back this year.
Awesome.
And they just liked it so much. In other words, it was just a total different deal. So told Doug, I says, they need to be on the trailer. And then we got Dave Shaw. Dave Shaw, of all the guys, he was the number 2 man until last year around the Speedway here.
Yep.
And he quit and went to the airport, run the airport now.
Yep.
And that's all fine because Dave is one of my best friends, you know. And so Doug calls Dave up. That's the big boss calling what used to be the second big boss up.
Yep.
And he says, Bobby's going to do the parade. I need some help. And so Dave Shaw, hey, one of my best friends that I have. So he's thinking, what does he need for Bobby? And so I told him, he says, we need Bobby to be in the parade, and we need you to make sure that it all goes well. The float gets built. They're going to build a float for us, which they did. It's a pretty nice float. And we just had a friggin' ball. My two daughters went with me, and my wife went with me, and they were up there shaking around on the thing and waving at the people. And I mean, the thing ends up being fun.
Yeah.
Not like the old days, because Mario and I used to go and get in the back of the convertibles.
Yep.
Like now we got orange ones this year. That's what we used. This way it was really fun because we had a whole float, had the people on both sides, and they were really, I mean, I had a lot of fans out there.
Oh, you're a fan favorite for sure. And the answer name.
Well, I mean, yeah.
You know, when you win, if they would have said in 50 years you're going to have your own float in the 500 parade, what would you have said 50 years ago?
Well, I wouldn't believe I'd be here 50 years. Who would have ever thought it was going to last this long? You know?
The second largest parade next to the Macy's Day Parade.
Can you believe that? In
It's
other words,
amazing.
I mean,
Indianapolis up next to New York City.
And I didn't remember that. It's been so long since I've been in the parade. And so when Doug calls, he's telling me these same numbers, and I said, wow, Well, I knew it was big, and I used to go in it every year, but I just quit going to it, you know.
So you get started in racing. How does it start? I know about, and I want to talk about Pikes Peak because anybody that drive that course, I was watching some stuff on it after we were talking. I, of course, know about the modern day Pikes Peak. Ain't quite like what it was then. So
they can wreck anything. Just give it to some people.
Yeah,
Rico, and they'll
give
get
it
it
to some
wrecked. Don't
people.
worry about it. I mean,
So where did you start at in racing? What was your original?
Albuquerque, New Mexico, and I was 15 years old, and they were all grown-ups that we were running against, and it was the original. Hot Rod Magazine did a study on this many years ago. But the whole answer is super modified racing started in Albuquerque, New Mexico. Then it went, of course, to Phoenix and Tucson and wherever have you, Colorado
Those
and things
are
like that.
unbelievably fast cars.
Yeah.
Crazy fast. And just a little fact for you. This suite, before we bought it, was Hot Rod Magazine suite.
Oh, this was?
This was.
You're kidding. They used
and
to.
if you look over on that door over there, the sliding door, you can see where we peeled the letters off. Hot Rod.
Hot Rod Magazine used to sponsor my older brother Jerry, who got killed here in 1959. Mm-hmm. And in Hot Rod Magazine, they all of a sudden, because of Jerry and Ray Brock, it's a guy's name, it's going back a long time. But at any rate, they just sponsored my brother in most everything he did. So I'll bet you that's the reason they had this suite back then.
Oh, I'm sure. But it's so funny when we first bought it the first year, this goes back 5 or 6 now. Linda Vaughn's walking down through here. She'd been down at Bill Simpson's, and she's walking down through here. She said, "Hey, Rico, are you in the Hot Rod suite?" I said, "Well, it was Hot Rod, honey. Now it's ours."
That's mine. Yeah.
And she said, "Oh, so they're not here?" I said, "You're always welcome, but they're not here anymore."
She's welcome everywhere. Sweetest girl.
Oh,
She's
my
been
God.
into this friggin' racing, Rico, as long as I have, I think,
So I go to a thing at Prime 47, my buddy's restaurant downtown, and it was something to do with Mario, and Mario was the guest of honor, and she was the host, I think, or something like that. And Linda's up there, and she says, and I'm sure that this is why she said it. You know how hungry she is sometimes with the things she says. She says, and she was off mic, and then she said, let me have that mic again. She grabs the mic, and she says, "I just want everybody to know that I have never been sexually harassed in the automotive racing business." And I thought, okay,
wow.
so I thought to myself, so how many of you harassed?
That was better.
Yeah.
I like that one.
And that's why she said it, because she's always jacking with people, having a good time.
Someday it's got to be our turn, I'm talking about the mail.
That's right. So, but anyhow, so Super Modifieds is the start. So it's you and who is it? You and Al?
There was 3 brothers that were going. Al was too young then.
Yep.
I mean, we were too young. But in those days, the laws, everything, drinking, everything was 21. But they really didn't care in Albuquerque. The fans loved us. In other words, I was going to school at the time, which I didn't do very long. In other words, as soon as I started racing, I thought, what the heck would I go to school for? I'm going to be a race driver. This is stupid,
I totally
Waste
understand
of time.
that.
And it paid off.
Well, I mean,
For you, it worked.
it worked, but I don't tell
Stay
the
in
kids
school.
that I talk to quit school
Right,
for
right.
any reason.
Well, I don't tell them to quit either. See, I'm proud to say that I was 275 out of 278 kids in my graduating class. So I almost quit, but I went ahead and finished up, just third from last. So
From my I just didn't. So I just quit school. I mean, the only thing I did was English and auto mechanics in the wrestling team. So no reason to keep doing that. The girls always did my English for me. So.
Yeah.
Some girl did it, I mean, I didn't do anything in school. My auto mechanics teacher I mean, I knew so much more about the cars than he did. He'd give me 35 cents to go down and go to the movie during his time that he has me in the auto mechanics class.
Get lost.
Yeah, get lost, you know. Well, just walking a little ways down to the first theater, you know. So go and watch a movie, you know.
Yeah.
Well, folks wouldn't give me the 35 cents to duck school, but the teacher would, you know.
Sounds to me they were forcing you out, so we'll go with that.
Yeah, forcing me out. So anyway, then I started expanding my racing because I'd go to Phoenix every once in a while. And then a little bit later, got to go to California.
What was
CRA,
Phoenix? What was the track in Phoenix at the time?
The half-mile dirt.
Okay.
That's all I ran.
Okay.
Yeah. And a couple other tracks, South Mountain,
Yeah.
a few other tracks,
Yeah.
Tucson, and just all the tracks. And Phoenix was kind of a boom place for racing in those days.
Yep.
They had a lot of good race drivers came out of there,
Yep.
and some good cars.
Yep.
Basically, CRA cars.
Yep.
You know, it was Arizona
Was it
and
Manzanita that was there forever?
Manzanita. Yeah,
Yeah.
that was it. Yeah,
Manzanita. That's what I thought it was.
You got a pretty good memory, Rico.
I remember a couple of things. So,
Had a good friend of mine ran Manzanita.
yep.
Keith, whatever, and we were good friends, but it didn't make any difference. It wasn't a political deal. It was racing. And Phoenix had a lot of good race fans, so that's where I'd go a lot, more than any place. But then I got to where I was going to L.A., call it Compton, California,
Yep.
Ascot.
Ascot.
The famous
sure.
Ascot. Every weekend.
Agajanians, right?
Agajanian.
Yep.
He was one of my really, really close friends, you know.
Yep.
In other words, that's
Did a
the
lot
guy.
for motorsports.
Oh, he did a bunch.
Yep.
I mean, I have one Pikes Peak one year. I got to tell you about this real quick. And it was a good payday year. In other words, really made some money. And it was my own car. So as soon as I went home and got my bills paid, very few times did I ever charge anything that I couldn't pay for. But with a race car, I just couldn't afford all that at one time. So I got the magneto and the wheels from Hallebrand and got all that stuff from somebody. Now I got to pay it. Well, it was a good pay year at Pikes Peak, and I won it. And so I went to work and got home and paid my bills, bought an airplane. $3,300. That's all the money I had left. Paid $3,300 for an airplane because I had to go to California every weekend. And,
Okay.
And that driving.
So that's when you became the pilot.
Yeah. And I didn't
Awesome.
have a license, but I bought the airplane, and I really, I don't know how I could afford it because that was all my money that was left. But I'd go to California, Aggie'd give me $150, sometimes a couple of $100 for being there, and who had a in the business? Parnelli Jones. He had a flying club. His chief mechanic, Johnny Polson, ran the flying deal. Of course, not when they're racing back here in the summer.
Yep.
But Polson took a liking to me. One day I'm going out there in my airplane. I land there at Compton, and Polson says, "Now, give me the key to that airplane." Polson was kind of a strong, forceful guy, but a nice man. Got dang arms big as my legs, you know, big as yours, Rico. and Polson said, "Leave that airplane here." On my airplane, I'd pour the oil in the top, and I'd try to fly it while it was running out the bottom, you know, and get someplace. I mean, it was worn out, you know. And Polson got tired of me doing this. And so he just said, "Leave the plane here and get your plane home." It was Texas International or something before Southwest.
Yep.
So I got that home. I thought, wow, he's going to try to stop them oil leaks for sure. Well, the engine was worn out and junk, you know. So he took the whole thing out. The crankshaft was cracked. The case was cracked. I mean, everything was junk. And that Polson fixed that whole thing up for me, and he knew I didn't have any money, and so he didn't charge me any money.
He saved your life.
Oh, I tell you what. And I'm flying that thing at night half the time, too. I mean, talked about being in no license, you know.
So
I
is that when you met Parnelli then, or was it?
No. Ironically, I didn't meet him then. I didn't meet Parnelli until Pikes Peak. Now, he had seen me run some sprint cars because he was already, the golden-haired boy in the whole United States of America in racing. He was already young, a legend. And all I could do is look goo-goo-eyed at the guy, but I didn't have a chance to meet him. And yet, he's Agajanian's #1 hitman, if you want to call it that, or his driver.
Yep.
And I mean, that was just the way it was. And so
he was probably one of the smartest of, one of, not the smartest, but there's a lot of you guys that are very smart with the way you did things. But with his investments and all the property in California.
Agajanian?
Yeah. They own the whole side of the mountain there. Yeah. Crazy money.
I'm amazed that you bought an airplane. About what age were you in your career when you went up and bought an airplane? I know what that
22.
means now. If you buy an airplane now, that's a pretty big deal.
This wasn't
Was
much
it
of an
different back then?
airplane. I'm going to tell you
This
what.
wasn't much of an airplane.
You debate whether you're going to walk or ride with me,
Were people like, Bobby didn't even graduate from high school, and now he just bought an airplane?
And again, this wasn't much of a plane, but it would fly.
I'm holding too much stock in the fact that it's an airplane.
I didn't know about weather. I couldn't fly bad weather. And if I run into clouds somewhere, I just land on a little dirt road somewhere, wait till it blows over and crank it up and go again. But somehow or another, I always got to the racetrack. Always on a Saturday night probably.
Yeah, right.
And I had to be home. And remember, it was taking me 18 hours to drive out there. And it was all open range. That means the Indians didn't have any fences. And I got to go through all that country with the sheep and the cows on the road. And if you hit one, you got to pay for it. And you got to do it on the spot. Well, I don't have that much money. I can't do that.
It was cheaper to buy an airplane than hit a cow and pay for it.
Oh, absolutely. And
so what was it to fly? How far to fly time to get there?
Well, I had to make one stop, Prescott, Arizona.
Yep.
So it'd take me 7 hours. In other words, I could fly it in 7 hours, 18 hours to drive. So
that's a pretty easy choice.
Oh, that was...
That's even worth risking your life, apparently, and leaking.
All the racing, all the hundreds of miles an hour on a track was not the most dangerous thing you've done. It's flying an airplane that was barely an airplane.
We had some trying times.
Yeah,
I got married here and there, and so I make a little money here and there, the endorsement business started being fairly good, and long story short, one day I go over to the airport, and the guy that owns the airport, Mr. Cutter, big company, right? Mr. Cutter and my dad were really good friends. He knew that my dad didn't have a lot of money because some of the airport was on my father's property, and they don't ever talk about it. They just do it. That's just the way it was. And so I go over to the airport one day to get my little thing and go someplace, and Mr. Cutter is standing there, and he says, Bobby, give me the keys to that. He hated Cessnas because he was a Beechcraft dealer.
Yep,
see?
sure.
And a big one.
Yep.
And so he says, give me the key to that airplane of yours out there. And sit under a tree out there to get a little shade, And so I don't know why he wants that. That's strange. But Mr. Cutter's a big man, so I give him the key to my plane. And he gives me a key to another plane. He says, this is your airplane. That one is mine now. And I says, and he's given me a Bonanza. This is too high on the pecking order. This doesn't make sense. I have no money. In other words, God, I have no way to pay for that.
Yep, right.
And so I told Mr. Cutter, I says, Mr. Cutter, I have no money. I says, people might think I'm rich, but I'm telling you, I'm plenty poor. I don't have any money. But he says, and he was probably right, I'm going to get myself killed if I keep flying in that airplane, because he knows I don't have a license. He knows I shouldn't be up in the sky. He knows all these things. And so I said,
good.
okay. I says, well, he said, don't worry about it. I got somebody's going to check you out right now. So he puts one of his pilots says, go show Bobby how to fly this airplane. Well, now I got a Bonanza. Now I can make California without stopping at Prescott. In other words, Albuquerque straight to Compton, California, with no stops in between. Now I'm really big shotting.
How quick can you get there then?
Oh, I think that one was taking me about probably 5 hours. Yeah.
Wow.
Yeah.
That's like setting a world record, right? Compared to what you were dealing with.
Albuquerque to basically L.A., wow, that was a good deal.
Yeah.
I mean,
Yeah.
L.A.'s always got bad. Remember in those days, you couldn't see anywhere.
Yeah,
You'd
the
start
smog.
going down
Yeah.
into the valley, and it smells so bad you think that you're going to die before you get there.
God.
I
The
mean, well,
fumes, the carbon monoxide.
You're like, get me
Oh,
in a
I
race
mean,
car where I'm
you-
safe.
You can't see. You cannot see.
Yeah.
If an airport's 5 miles down the road, I don't see it till I get 2 miles. You can't see out there.
Yeah.
It is that way all the time. So here I am becoming an IFR pilot because I still can't see where I'm going, you know. And so I'd fly that thing. Of course, it'd just never get shut off. Just fly, fly, fly. Racetrack and racetrack. Racetrack back home. And I had a garage I was running those days too, see.
So Simpson had a Cessna of some sorts. I don't know what it was. He was telling the story the
That
other
was
day.
a jet.
Well, no, he was telling this is some plane that he had down in Mexico.
Oh, okay.
And he said, I didn't want to mess with it anymore. And he said, I gave it to the guys at the airport that always takes care of my stuff. And, this is something older. He was probably putting around in down there or something, And he said, I gave it to him like 2 or 3 years ago. And he said, I went to him. He said, how long has it been since you did the rebuild on that? I said, well, hell, we haven't rebuilt that. That thing's been running great. It's been flying it. They just been flying it. Never had it rebuilt.
I got one stolen down in Mexico. Excuse me. I have a house down there.
Yeah.
And still do now.
Yeah.
And I just had been out in California, and I had a STOL plane, short takeoff and landing plane.
Yep.
Because I'd kind of burned out on the better planes.
Yep.
Flying too much.
Yep.
And so I go out to California, I get a new engine put in it, new tires on it, new brakes, new annual done to it, all fixed up nice. Flew it from there to Albuquerque, just loaded it up with all my stuff, headed to Mexico. And when I got down to Mexico, and I remember, I've got a $65,000 bill that I haven't paid yet, okay? In other words, I just left California. I have an open account with the guy anyway. He's a real close friend. And I go to Mexico, and my plane's gone. The drunkard stole it. And I hadn't even checked the oil the first time on that brand new engine.
Oh, my God.
I get down there, and I says, they stole my plane? Wow.
Yeah. Yeah.
And I got one of the head guys from Volkswagen of America and his wife down there with me as my guest, right?
And no plane.
And I got no plane.
No plane.
And I got 2 cats.
Yeah.
I don't have a wife then. I got 2 cats and those 2 people with me and no airplane to take them home.
Yep.
I mean,
So you're racing open wheel, you're doing the sprint car stuff, and then how does Pikes Peak come along?
well, Pikes Peak would be every year for me.
Yeah.
Wouldn't have been for Parnelli, but remember what I said. He was the golden-haired guy in the whole country. So Ford Motor
And what was he running at the time? He was here.
Stock car division.
Stock
he
car.
was. Yeah, he had
Yeah.
just.
He had
No,
a-
hadn't won here yet.
Hadn't been here yet.
No.
Or won yet.
Hadn't won yet.
Yeah.
And so he's driving for Ford Motor Company in the stock car division, but it's Mercury. Now, I always thought Ford and Mercury same,
Yeah.
That's what I always thought, but it wasn't. So with Mercury is a big deal, and they hired Parnelli, and the thing that was really neat about that whole deal, as soon as we saw each other, we liked each other. In other words, we became friends so fast it was just unbelievable, and we were together every day because I didn't have to worry about Parnelli. He's not running. I'm running race cars. He's running stock cars. I already know he's probably the best driver in the whole friggin' world, but Pikes Peak's my cup of tea, And so I can show him and teach him everything I know at Pikes Peak, which I've never done for anybody else except my own family. And so we were together every day doing our practice in a passenger car, and I'd just show him all my little secrets and all my little shortcuts. And through all of this, we became better friends and better friends and better friends. And just unbelievable. And then one day, just casually, he's talking to me, and he says, now he'd already been coming back here. You could see the bombs were about ready to go off for Parnelli Jones, see? Agajanian. I mean, there's two really big deals, And so he says, you ought to come back and come to Indianapolis. And I says, no, I wasn't too sure I wanted to do that. I didn't think I was good enough to come to Indianapolis, and I totally felt that way. You don't have to beg Bobby Unser, because if there was a freaking racetrack somewhere, I'd go to it. If there was any kind of a race car, I wanted to run it. But this place was too big for me. I mean, my head wasn't ready. I don't think I was ready with my driving skills. But Parnelli thought I was. Now, isn't that weird? In other words, here's a guy that just wins everything that he ever runs. And he thinks that Bobby Unser ought to come back here.
So who was he running for at the time? Who was Parnelli running for?
Agajanian.
Yeah, okay.
I mean,
yep.
Top of the pecking order
Yep.
again, And so, it make a long story short, I just dropped the subject. I really didn't want to talk about it anymore. It wasn't part of what I wanted to do. I needed to go run a lot of sprint car races. Man, I can drive somewhere every week. I'm busy,
Right.
Midget races.
Yep.
A lot of stuff to do. And I enjoyed that. And I did pretty good at it. But then I get home, and then the phone rings again. Parnelli's on the phone. He said, all right, I got you a car to drive. Take your driver's test in. I said, holy mackerel, this is getting too serious. This cat is not
This is
screwing
Parnelli
around.
called Bobby, come on, get to Indianapolis.
Yeah.
I can't believe it. I think this is just not my cup of tea. I'm not ready to do this. And it gets really embarrassing after that, because then somebody in Albuquerque hears about it. Now, in Albuquerque, I was already a legend, because Lord only knows I won everything as a 16-year-old, I won the whole Southwest Championship in the super modified.
Oh, wow.
So I was like a child star.
Yep.
And all I know is it seems like it's pretty easy, and I'm having a ball.
Yep.
That's the reason I quit school.
Yep.
I mean,
They forced you out.
they forced me out. My English. Well, you know what would happen, Rico, that would embarrass me so bad? Go to school Monday morning. My English was a real pretty English teacher. I could remember that. And she'd make me stand up in front of the class, and she'd read the newspaper articles on Bobby just winning the races that weekend. And that used to embarrass me so bad, I just said, the heck with it. I'm not going to stay in this. This institution's not for me.
Forced you out.
Forced me out. and so then
so
Parnelli's got it figured out I'm going to come to Indianapolis. And I really am afraid. So now...
And what year, how old were you then?
I was probably around 22, 21, something like that. I was legal. In other words, legal age. I'd lied about my age all my life. Ever get you in Albuquerque, I'm going to show you. I did the I did the Mexican road race when I was 17 years old the first year. And on my illegal driver's license that I had to get AAA license, it says I'm 28. Well, that was a big lie, I never usually didn't lie that much,
You really stretched her out that time.
Really stretched that out.
How old do you tell people you are right now? Are you 55?
No, I'm not
56?
that old. I'm 84 now. But that's all
If
right.
Parnelli Jones hadn't pushed you to come to Indianapolis, and you were about 22
I would have
when he
never
did,
come.
you never would have?
I would have never come.
Unbelievable.
I mean, I had my heroes at Indianapolis. Tony Bentonhausen. He was one of my big heroes. He would stop by Albuquerque. We had a garage tow cars, tow trucks, and gas station. And I mean, every year, he'd buy a new Cadillac every year. And I knew he and his wife, for some reason, I'm not going to remember. I'm a young kid, but I'm literally winning everything in our state. In other words, I'd already become a legend, see, as a young kid. And it didn't get to my head because still had no money, you know. Didn't get any money for racing either. Did it all for nothing. I bought one 30-30 rifle because I was really into deer hunting. That was my total racing for probably my first 4 and 5 years. See? And that was all right.
The money you made got you up and down the road.
Went to the race car.
Yep.
Yeah. But I won all the races, so it was a good car. And
Yep.
it was my dad's car. And
Yep.
he didn't have the money to have extra nice stuff. We built everything.
So did your dad get into it as you started becoming more and more successful? He had to be proud, right?
Oh yeah, because I mean, and my uncle had won Pikes Peak. Uncle Louis had won it 9 times.
Oh wow!
Now Uncle Joe, the 3 of them, there was my dad, Jerry, then Uncle Joe and Uncle Louis. They were all 3 at one time for the Coleman, Coleman truck in Denver, Colorado. And what they make it basically snow plows, 4-wheel or front wheel drives. And so they built an Indy car, and just to come to Indianapolis, and they were going to have 3 of them, and the 3 boys were going to come back. And Uncle Joe got killed on the highway one day testing the car. They didn't have much pavement in those days. It's hard to imagine today because we don't have much dirt anymore. It's all paved.
Right.
But in those days,
Exactly.
the other way around.
It went the other way.
So
Right.
Uncle Joe was out on a paved road just south of Denver, and the car jumped off for some reason and got himself killed. And it was only recently, all of these years, 100 years goes by, whatever, some elderly guy, really nice historical organization in Albuquerque, came up with newspaper clippings that went back to 1915. And there it was. Absolute newspaper article, the original, when Uncle Joe got killed, exactly where on the highway.
Oh, wow.
And we thought he died on the highway.
Yeah.
Okay? But and I didn't even know what year it was.
Yeah.
I wasn't too sure about the year. And so the year now came to be, for sure, because my folks were both gone by then. Okay?
Yep.
So a little mixed up. So there it is in the newspaper clipping. The year, the exact place, and he actually died in the hospital. We didn't know that.
Oh wow!
In other
Wow,
words,
so he didn't
jumped
pass
off the
out.
road,
Yeah.
and they
Got him picked up and got him to the hospital.
That's all in the newspaper. 1950. I mean, it can't be. These articles went back so far, I couldn't believe it. And so it was like really found out history, you know.
Yeah.
And when they put the first motorcycle sidecar on the top of Pikes Peak in history. Now there is an article on that. What a
horrible idea, by the way.
The time they left in the morning, Rico, the time they got to Glen Cove, the halfway place, and the time they got to the top, and the time they got back down to the bottom, and they're told about they tore up their tires because they couldn't keep it from going down fast, lock up the brakes, tear up your tires, that type of deal. It's all in the newspaper. I just couldn't believe it.
I saw the picture or a video of you on YouTube or something of running Pikes Peak, and you know I've been around racing all my life. I love it. It's a passion. You know, there's some real genuine people in racing. You know, for the most part, they can't be genuine assholes or genuine great people, but they are genuine people, one way or the other. But you know, we sponsor a great deal of people in the open wheel, sprint, midget, Silver Crown, USAC ranks, if you will. And, you know, watching them in the turns, you know, just, you know, in the tire developments that they, you know, that Hoosiers come up with, you know, and so forth, you know. But it's crazy looking at that picture of you going up, or watching that video of you going up Pikes Peak, and you are completely crossed up, coming through one of the turns and got tires on that are smaller than you'd have on your car today.
Those were recap tires, even.
Yeah. And I mean, it was just, unfortunately, there's a few that are spoiled in this business these days, and that like to bitch and complain about, everything to do about this and that, and you know what? You have zero idea who paved the way for this, and you need to take a little refresher course on folks like you, folks like AJ, Big Al, and Steve Rutherford. I mean, the list goes on and on and on of the folks that went through. I mean, it was you guys were like test pilots. It wasn't like, hey, get in this. This thing is super safe. It's get in it, and I hope we see you after the race is over.
That's right.
Rick Mears, if it wasn't for Terry Trammell putting him back together, he
wouldn't
never would have walked
walking.
again.
He would have never walked
again.
again.
Took the whole nose of the car and crushed his feet, and so I mean, it's just. But it's all of these developments that have happened along the way that have made it better, that have made it safer. We were talking about Bill Simpson the other day when you were at the shop. Something would happen, Bill would try to find a solution for it.
He wouldn't try. He would find a solution for it.
Yeah.
That guy is... I know sometimes we get mad at him and we want to kill him. No doubt about that.
That's part of the love for him.
I know it, but he's done more to save lives in all of motor racing than any single person that I can think of.
And
I
that's
mean,
huge.
before him, there was nothing.
Nothing.
In other words, my brother died right here because of burns.
Yep.
Today, if he'd have on stuff that Simpson invented, pioneered. That's a better word.
Yep.
Jerry, it wouldn't even be a hiccup right now if that's what would happen. I mean, today they just wouldn't even pay that much attention to it. Okay, he'd have a few scars from the burns and everything, but he'd have been back.
I don't even know if you have that anymore, as good as they've got it, and but Bill, the way Bill started, he told me the story, and I was, Bobby and I were talking about it. Bill says, how I got started in the safety business? I said, no, I have no idea. And of course, I love it. I want to hear this stuff. This is awesome stuff. And he said, well, I was 17 years old. I think he said 17. He said, I was 17 years old, and he goes, we were testing out this parachute. I said, yeah? He goes, yeah. And he goes, I had my station wagon, and we had the back window rolled down in the station wagon, and the parachute hooked onto the back of it, and we were throwing it out of the back of the car to see if it would catch the car and slow it down. I said, well, how in the hell did you come? I mean, where did that come from? He said, well, parachute in the air. I mean, he's got an unbelievable, it's what we were talking about the other day, a beautiful mind. I mean, the way he would think of things like that. So anyhow, he's talking about that, and he goes, so I start, and him and Perdome were childhood friends and grew up together. So here you got the Snake and Simpson, right? Which is quite the duo in itself. And he's talking about it, and he goes, yeah, you know who my first customer ever was? He said first big customer. I said, no, who's that? And I mean, and I can relate to this because, you know what? Our first ever big customer was Walmart, and when they called, I thought it was a joke. Nothing different. I thought it was somebody jacking with me. I really did, and nothing different than what Simpson went through. And, he gets this phone call. This guy says, are you the guy that's making those parachutes? And he says, well, yeah. He says, I want 3 of them. He said, well, you want 3 of them? He said, yes, I want 3 of them. I mean, hell, everybody could hardly afford to buy one, let alone 3, right? He says, send me, he goes, I want 3 of them. He goes, well, he goes, where are you? He said, well, I'm in Lincoln, Nebraska. He said, well, how the hell am I going to get them there? I'm in California. And he says, go down to the Greyhound station. Now, keep in mind, there was no UPS. Mm-hmm. There was no FedEx.
That's what you got to remember.
The mail did not carry parcels. The mail carried mail. Okay? So he said, go down to the Greyhound station. He said, put it on this Greyhound bus and tell it needs to be at the Lincoln, Nebraska stop, and they'll get it to me. So this thing goes through a series of buses to get there. Well, Bill says, well, okay. He goes, well, how am I going to get paid? He says, well, I guess I'll send you a check if you send me a bill. Right? It's like, well, how the hell is this? I'd go to races and somebody just give me the money and I'd get one, right? And so anyhow, it turns out to be a gentleman by the name of Speedy Bill. And Speedy Bill owned Speedway Motors in Lincoln, Nebraska. It is, I would have to assume, is the largest in the world in that business.
You don't have to assume that, Father, because they are the largest in the world.
Yeah.
For like catalog racing pieces. They make everything.
Yeah. And they've got a museum there. So this is what we got us talking about. It was kind of tied it all together, what we were talking about. They have a museum there, and this museum has been curated by Speedy Bill from all of the years, right? He has the original race shop of, help me out who it is, the IndyCar. Did we figure out who that was? What was it, Shaw or somebody? The original race shop they took out and built back inside.
That one, I didn't know Speedy Bill or any of the kids at the time.
Yeah.
In other words, it's another story how I met him.
Yeah. So anyhow, I don't remember who this was, but Bill bought all this stuff when they were going to sell off this old IndyCar shop. It would be, much like, and I'm losing my thought here on who it is. I'll think of it in a minute, but one of the local guys here, that built the old cars and stuff like that. Well, anyhow, so Bill's walking us through there, and I'm with Forrest Lucas. Now, we've flown in from Topeka or Brainerd. I can't remember which one it was, but we went there. And Speedy pulls up at the airport, and he's in this old Cadillac limo. Now, Speedy Bill wore a campaign hat all the time, like, tilted, tilted.
His whole life.
His whole life, and yellow glasses. His whole life. That was him. That was this. You never had to wonder who that guy was. That was Speedy, okay? Mm-hmm. Anyhow, he pulls up there, and his son is driving the limo. Now, let me make it clear. They had enough money that they could have sent anybody, anything that they wanted to pick us up. But it was Bill and one of his boys that runs the company for him at the time. It still does at that. But they're picking us up. So then myself, Forrest, and Morgan Lucas get in the limo, and Speedy starts. He starts going. And he walks us through this museum. He's got the largest pedal car collection in the world. And I'm telling you, they all look brand new. It's ridiculous. The old metal pedal cars.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
I would venture to say there's $5 million+ worth of pedal cars in that museum. And he's got a Mercedes IndyCar engine that absolutely 100%. Roger Penske doesn't even have one of these engines. Mm-hmm. Okay, and
theoretically you can't get one.
Yeah.
They're like government,
It's like a Chevy engine or a Honda. You can't get one of these engines.
No,
they will not give you one of these engines. They're afraid somebody would take it, reverse engineer it, and steal some of their proprietary information. So anyhow, he's going on and on and on, and Forrest and I are going back to the airport, and he says to me, he says, he's proud of himself, isn't he? I said, and Forrest is a jokester, he's joking around. I said, that dude has done it, man. He has done it because he was the first one I ever knew to tell me about how he used to ship. He said, I used to show up at the Greyhound station with small block or short blocks, slide them on the belly pin. He said, them lazy ass bus drivers that just sat there watching me out the window. It'd be raining like hell, and I'm, what I mean. He was a great storyteller. Unfortunately, his wife passed, and he passed shortly thereafter. But it's people like him, people like Simpson, Bobby, the people that have made this business what it is today, made this this exciting thing what it is today. And that's a lot of times people don't get where it comes from, how it got here. I mean, it just didn't show up on the front doorstep, all right? There was a lot of people, unfortunately, his brother, perished. Dale Sr. perished. There's a lot of people that have given their lives for this, to make it what it is today. So, but
I remember one day, Speedy Bill again. My youngest son Robbie needed to progress up. We did the go-karts, then the late model dirt track stocks, and won all of them. And all of a sudden I'd heard that Speedway Bill is interested in, they're going to start a new series. Take the old Indy cars, put Chevrolet engines in them, and race them. Now that one made a lot of sense. No more expensive engines. Well, expensive, but not that bad. And
were they naturally aspirated? Is that what they just,
totally normally aspirated. Yeah. They're sprint car engines. Come on.
Yeah. Okay.
And I think, I don't know, I think we limited them, or they did, to 350, I think. Now, it really makes sense. Now, the old Indy cars you could buy for almost nothing in those days. You know how times change.
Yep.
Today you couldn't, but in those days you could. You could $5,000 would buy almost any car.
Wow.
That's a transmission. The tranny costs more than that.
Yep.
At any rate, so I put my young son in my airplane there one day, and we flew all the way to Lincoln. Now, naturally, I'd seen Speedy Bill because I worked the hot rod shows, if you want to call them.
Yep.
But I didn't. I didn't have to do that, and there was no reason to know him because, come on, he raced sprint cars, that's all, nothing past that. So I needed to go to work and meet this man, and I needed to talk to him because a museum is going to come up in Albuquerque. It's the one my brother has. So you got to learn. Now here's a smart man. Here's a really smart businessman. So I flew all the way to Lincoln, Nebraska, met that man, and asked him in detail how we going to do a museum. And the biggest problem is, what are you going to do with it when you die? And I know I'm not trying to start a morbid conversation here, but it's real. Mm-hmm. Nobody's going to make it forever.
Right.
So my interest is, what are you going to do when you die? What are you going to do with all this? Got a lot of money. Okay, but his museum now, that's what I'm interested in. Museum, just like he says, millions of dollars, these little cars. I can't believe how about the engines he's got?
Oh, yeah.
I mean, he's got a fortune there.
Remember the Hot Wheels car that had the German helmet on it?
Yeah.
He has that car, the car.
Yeah. So I flew all the way to Lincoln just to meet, not to meet Speedy Bill, but he knows who I am. He'll be honest with me. I already know that. And so I have a conversation with him. What are you going to do? Now, you die, what are you going to do? What the kids are all going to fight over your money. I hated to do it, but I got into the hard talk,
Yeah.
And that man had an answer for the whole friggin' thing. I couldn't believe it. And he'd spit them answers out faster than I could ask the questions. And what it is, it's the Smithsonian. He teamed up with the Smithsonian in Washington. Mm-hmm. So in other words, hey, there's nobody, no relatives, no I promised, none of that stuff will overcome the Smithsonian. Mm-hmm. So the day he died, that's who became the technical boss.
Yep.
Like it or not, they are the boss.
Yep.
Now, the kids run it.
Unbelievably smart.
Oh, so now I have the answer. I would have never thought of that.
Because you guys were thinking about doing it, right?
Well, yeah, we were already into thinking about it. But you're not there, and you don't know what to do. Al's got what? He's got two daughters he starts out with, and a son. Well, the two daughters die. Okay, so now he's got a son left, and so what's he going to do with his? He's not a poor man anymore, so what's he going to do? Same thing. You got to learn this stuff. And you don't learn it by talking to the poorest people. Go talk to the ones that really made a couple
ones
of
that
bucks.
still have it, right?
Yeah.
Exactly.
And that's how I started
Yep.
with Speedy Bill.
Yeah.
Of course, I ended up with Carson, one of his kids, and
Great
he and
guys.
Robbie hooked up into racing together, and I'd help them do Pikes Peak cars and stuff like that. But it ended up being a real fun deal, and Robbie still works there today.
You said he shows up, right? Or does he
Shows
work
up. Well, no, I didn't see it. I misused the one word.
That's what I said the other day. But
Yeah.
they're a great family, and you know, I of course have got to know you and have got to know your wife, and it was pretty awesome the other day. I was in Arkansas for a meeting with Walmart, and Lisa's texting me, "Hey, we want to make sure we see you." And I'm just sitting around killing time because we had a later meeting that day.
Yeah,
and
excuse me just a second.
Yeah.
You got to remember now, he's already sent me a fair amount of glasses, hasn't charged me a penny for it. I did try to pay him, but
Yeah,
not charge
that
me.
ain't happening.
That ain't going to happen.
He's
That
got
was
it all
for
paid
sure.
forward, so I'm good with it.
I had to come and say hi to it.
But
Okay.
he says-
no matter what.
You're like, I'd rather buy the glasses so I don't have to say hi to Rico.
Yeah, right, whatever. That's you, Adam. But anyhow, but the next thing you know, my phone rings, and it's an Albuquerque number, and I'm like, hello. He says, hey, it's Bobby. I said, what are you doing? And we just start talking, and he says, I want to make sure we get together. I said, well, I'll be back in the office Wednesday. I said, I'm out Monday, Tuesday. And he goes, well, I want to make sure I get together. I said, well, yeah. I said, Lisa and I already got set. Well, she didn't tell me that we're meeting with you. So here I am getting
They
Lisa.
don't always
Well,
tell.
yeah.
I'm only the boss. Sometimes they forget to tell me.
Yeah. So, anyhow, I know you have some things to finish up, and maybe we can get together and talk again when you get here for the vintage car race, which is coming up here in a couple of months. And
That's the fun time, Rico.
that is.
No, one of our fun times, I should
Yeah,
say.
yeah. We make it fun no matter what. So that's the best part. But thank you for being a friend and your support with our products, and anything we can ever do for you, we're here.
Well, you got the good stuff because you got your head. That's where the good stuff comes from, you know. That's the way it is. It's like we talked about Simpson. It's all the same way. If there isn't a leader, it doesn't happen.
Yeah.
So I got the leader. I found him.
And that's the commercial again. But anyhow, so we'll wrap it up. Adam?
All right. Well, three-time Indy 500 champion Bobby Unser, thank you so much for stopping by the Fathead Suite and being a guest on The Skinny with Rico. And I'm Adam Ritz. Thank you so much for joining us.
Well, thanks for you guys having me. I'm sorry the Indy 500's over. I thought it ought to go another month. You know, I'm just starting to have a good time. You know? Well, it used to go a whole month in May. Now 2 weeks. Jeez, I just get warmed up in the 2 weeks.
That's right.
You know?
I think they'll bring it back soon. I hope.
This episode of The Skinny has been brought to you by Fatheads, the undisputed leader in oversized eyewear. Check out all of our great products at fatheads.com. A podcast version of The Skinny is available on iTunes and ricoelmore.com.